This video is part 2 of the 5-part series of how to change your life, become an extraordinary coach, and build a thriving business. In this video, we're going to break down the next 5 ingredients.
So in this series, we are teaching how to change a life from a coaching perspective. Now, all these concepts are going to apply, obviously, to you and your life and all the different roles that you play. But from a coaching perspective, what are the things that you need to understand to help your clients change their lives? And my belief is that the best way to create a really good business is to be a really good coach. So if you can understand how to change people's lives, you're going to do better work for people, and that's going to get you more clients. I think there's way too much focus on sales tactics and marketing campaigns and all these things that are a part of the process, but they're not the main part of the process. The main part of the process is that you have a good product and you give people a really good outcome. So that's what we're breaking down here. This is a 5-part series, How to Change a Life. There are 14 components and 2 concepts, overall concepts of how to change a life. And yesterday we talked about experiences and memories. And just a quick recap, experiences are what happened to us, and memories are how we remember what happened to us. The experiences, the stuff that happened, that doesn't change. But our memories of those things can change. And quite often they do constantly change for a lot of us, especially if that experience was significant in some way, it was emotional or traumatic or whatever. So understanding that our memories of the experiences are different, can be different, is really critical. So from a coaching standpoint, we need to take into account the person's memories. How are they holding on to their life experiences, rather than just taking the life experiences at face value and making our own judgments, because we need to understand that 2 people with the same exact experiences might have different memories of those experiences. And if they have different memories of those experiences, they could need entirely different coaching. They could need different angles, different analogies, different perspectives, different tools, different exercises. And it's really important for us to understand that we have our own memories based on our experiences as a coach, and our memories aren't necessarily going to match theirs either. So the way we were coached, or the way we had a breakthrough around certain experiences in our life, it's dangerous and disrespectful coaching to believe that what we did with our memories based on those experiences are the same thing that somebody else needs with their memories based on their experiences, even if the experiences are the same. And that's why coaching is so much more of an art form than just science. It's performed as art, but informed by science. Let me say that again. Coaching is performed as art, but it's informed by science. So you have to understand a lot of what's going on under the surface, but then you've got to be flexible in your execution of that. Let's jump into a few more of these ingredients, and let me share my screen. Hopefully it'll work today. All right, today it looks like it's a success. So this is the image that we are using and that we use in our certification programs to understand what's happening below the surface. This is similar to the iceberg image I'm sure many of you have seen. You've got above the surface and below the surface. I love this one because the visual is of seeds and growth, and these little plants are growing just as we do as humans, right? But they're growing based on the seeds and the soil and all of this stuff underneath. So we see what's observable above the soil. We see the behaviors, we see our life circumstances, we have these goals, we hear the language that's going on externally. But the majority of changing somebody's life is happening internally. And so these 14 ingredients down below are what you have to understand as a coach. How you use them is going to be flexible depending on who's in front of you and all the elements that you're going to consider. But these are the 14 main ingredients in your ability as a coach to change somebody's life. Now, it's not easy in the sense that it's not like every time somebody has grief, you do this exercise, and then 35 minutes later, they'll be done with their grief, right? And you give them a prize and you go on their way. They go on their way, you go on your way. It's not that easy, but it's actually very simple. When you understand these ingredients at a deeper level, then it becomes a lot more simple to be able to use when appropriate. So in this video, I want to talk about, and by the way, as we go along, all of these videos, whatever's landing for you, please post a comment to let us know what's really landing. If you have a story to share about that particular concept, or you have questions, anything at all, I'd love it for it to be an interactive experience. So I'm going to talk about 5 of these ingredients in this video. We're going to talk about perceptions, attitudes, thoughts, emotions, and decisions. Now, these ingredients are not sequential. It's not like you first look at experiences and then memories and then perceptions. It's not sequential at all. But these are the chunks that we need to be aware of so that we can pick apart. We can listen to their language, and they will tell us generally their words and what they're not saying and their body language. When you pay attention as a coach, the client will direct you to some degree of how to direct them, how to facilitate a breakthrough. So the first ingredient here that I'm going to talk about is perceptions. And with each of these, my goal is for you to understand the distinctions, because a lot of these words are used interchangeably, and it's not really important that you match the word and the definition. What's important is that you understand the distinctions, even if you call them something else. I'm going to call them, obviously, what I call them and how I teach them, but the distinctions are important. So the first one is perceptions. Somebody's perception is their viewpoint. It's one of the phrases that we use in transformational coaching, and really neurotransformational coaching, which is our brand of coaching that helps people change their neurology, is model of the world. We want to understand the essence of and the concept of model of the world. And then we also want to understand that everybody has their own model of the world. And it's critical that we don't necessarily try to change somebody's model of the world unless that's necessary for the coaching, but especially in the beginning when you're starting to learn about how they're holding on to everything. You just want to understand their model of the world, and you've got to come from the place that all models of the world and all perceptions are valid. Now, 2 perceptions can be valid that don't agree with each other. So your perception based on your experiences can be valid from your life journey. Mine can be totally different, and both can be valid. We have to start from validity. If we don't start from validity, that somebody's model of the world is valid, then we actually will never be able to create the rapport that allows us to help people change their lives. That doesn't mean that somebody's perception that's valid doesn't need to be changed, because a lot of our perceptions are valid, but they're not aligned with what we want to experience in the world. So something can also be valid, but not aligned. But if you don't hold on to it as valid, you actually won't be able to change it or facilitate change as a coach or with your own perceptions of the world. So wishing things were different never changes anything. You've got to embrace the way things are. So perceptions of the world, they're like lenses, right? I got some glasses here. They're like different lenses that we put on. So I'm wearing these lenses, which means that the way I see the world is going to be determined by the filter that's in these lenses. And this is a dark lens, and it's got some fingerprints on them. And so I'm going to see the world that way. If somebody else has Elvis lenses on, then they're going to see the world a little bit different. I got a little purple tint to the world, right? Some people are going to see the world. Well, these glasses are broken all kinds of ways. I got no lens here. I don't have a earpiece over here, but some people's lenses, look like this. There's no tint there. There's nothing. Some people are a little bit darker. And the challenge is that all of us have a ton of perceptions, because our perceptions are based on the model of the world, that's based on the experiences, that's based on the memories, that's based on all of the things that make us human, right? So when we're meeting people, oh, these ones are broke too. when we're meeting people, we're meeting all of their representations basically of their life. We're meeting all of these perceptions. Let me see if I can go ahead and stuff this one in there. And this makes it kind of challenging to recognize that we're dealing with all of these different perceptions and they're all valid. So from a coaching standpoint, we need to explore these and figure out how the perceptions are relating to what they want to experience or determining what they want to experience in the world. And we as coaches have all those perceptions as well. So we need to recognize that our perceptions are not their perceptions, and we actually can keep them separate. And we can use different perceptions from our perspective and help them with their perceptions. In fact, different perceptions are great, because if I have a different perception of the world than you do, then I can ask questions from a new perspective and help you find answers that you probably haven't found before, because you've only been asking questions from your perception. So different perceptions are important as long as we're coming from the place that they're both valid. And then we can explore from that place of validity. So that's perceptions. The second ingredient are attitudes. Now, attitudes has like several different connotations to it. I think we tend to think that an attitude, or the way I hear the word used a lot, is like it's just an intentional choice. You know, you just see the world in a positive way or see the world in a negative way, and that's your attitude. What I want to open up here is the awareness that our attitudes are a state of mind, but they're based on our neurology. So when we're tired, I think all of you would agree with this. When you're tired, you don't have the same level of discernment or maybe the same level of determination. You certainly don't have the same energy. Maybe you eat differently when you're tired. Our defense mechanisms are a little bit lower usually when we're tired, when we're not nourished, when our bodies are fighting some kind of infection or just fighting some kind of internal conflict, even if it's energetic. So our attitudes can determine and influence and change our perceptions. If this is my perception when my body feels good and things are great and I got a lot of money in the bank, but then those circumstances change, my attitude might change. I'm depleted, I'm sick, maybe I've got coronavirus or whatever the circumstances are, and that perception might completely change. And then I see the world like everything is broken, and you know, look at me, like I've got no lens here, there's no hope, right? And it's the attitude sometimes that changes our perceptions, not necessarily the circumstances. So what does this mean as a coach? As a coach, again, we have our own attitudes and they have their attitudes. So we want to keep those separate. And we just need to recognize that sometimes what we need to help our clients do is just change their attitude, their neurological attitude, meaning like get more sleep and maybe change a little bit the way you're nourishing your body. A lot of us put so much pressure on our bodies and then we get pissed at our bodies for not performing right, but we don't feed them right, we don't rest them right, and then they don't work well. So sometimes that shift can be everything in a client. You might be amazed how much just an attitude shift based on neurology can change not just the perceptions, but change the overall outlook in life. And you might not even need to do much more than just help somebody change their attitude. So helping them understand how critical it is also really important. Because I think we don't give ourselves, I think for the most part, most of us are too harsh on ourselves, and we don't give ourselves the grace of understanding something like my attitude could change my perception. My perception could then change my triggers and my choices and my decisions and all the things, right? And it all might have started just with attitude. So we want to help people understand that. And obviously we want to keep it separate with ourselves. All right. The third one I want to talk about are thoughts. This is obviously a common word. We talk about it all the time. I think most of us, especially if you've been in personal development, you've thought about or heard about head talk. Maybe you're aware of what's going on in your head. You're listening to the voices inside that are telling you to not do this or go do this, or what are they going to think, or what if they find out, and all the imposter syndrome stuff. So all of those are lumped under just thoughts. Thoughts are just ideas that the brain has, basically, right? We've got external thoughts that we say, but the majority of what we do with coaching is the internal work. What are the judgments that we've got going on inside? What are the opinions that we have? How are we justifying our actions or other people's actions? What are the internal beliefs that we have? Now, we'll dive into beliefs at a different level in a different video. But thoughts are really just nothing more than beliefs, just with a ton of evidence and a lot of times with emotion attached to it. So what are the thoughts that we have about the world around us, about people in general, about ourselves? Our relationship to ourselves is really just, what are we saying about ourselves constantly, right? And we generally lump all that together into head talk. What's your head saying? Now, just because your head is saying something that you don't want it to say doesn't mean that the best advice is just pretend it's not, or just simply like power through it. The best thing we can do as coaches is come from a place of understanding and embracing whatever your head is saying is what your head is saying. Pretending it's not, or shaming yourself for what your head is saying, doesn't actually change anything. So we want to come from this overall belief that in order to change something, we must embrace it first. And I fully believe that we can't change anything that we don't embrace the validity of. And again, validity doesn't mean we agree, but it's valid because it is. And so we want to engage our head talk personally and as coaches with our clients. We want to engage our head talk. We don't necessarily want to get in there and change it right away, because it might be used in a positive way. So just because we've got head talk that might feel uncomfortable doesn't necessarily mean it needs to change. But if it does need to change, we want to do that through challenging it. We don't want to do it just by going, okay, when you see the world, you think this, or when you see your in-laws, you think this, or when you see money, you think this. Just think the other thing. Yeah, that'd be fantastic, wouldn't it? And then we would all change our lives via Facebook memes and Instagram quotes, right? If it was that easy. Of course, I know. I don't want to have that thought, but it's not that easy. The way to help people change their thoughts is to challenge their thoughts. Challenge the thinking. What usually happens when we challenge thinking is we find conflict. We find two thoughts that can't live together, or we find a thought that's actually not true to that human that hears themselves say a thought and go, actually, I don't fully believe that. So usually when we just start to challenge thinking, the knots start to untie themselves. The challenges and the conflicts start to unravel themselves. And then we can identify the thoughts that are problematic. So if there's a thought that the world is a dangerous place and everybody's out to kill me, all right, we're going to have to deal with that one, right? Where did that come from? We still do a lot of the same process in terms of challenging it and unraveling it, but then there's coaching exercises and tools that we can use to uproot a deep problematic thought like that. But the first thing we need to do is challenge them. My experience is that most of us don't challenge our head talk. We just listen to it, and we probably listen to the stuff that we shouldn't be listening to or follow those orders. And we don't explore the things that are there for us to explore that could be massively transformational for us. So as a coach, we want to help our clients explore. And the more that you believe thoughts are valid and exploring is just a neutral process, and we're facilitating change and we're doing it with advocacy, the less threatening it could be for the client. The fourth thing I want to talk about, speaking of threatening, is emotions. We are programmed by society generally, which sits on top of the way our intellectual computing mind works. We are programmed that emotions are threatening. And I think it's because we don't understand them and we can't control them. So anything that we can't control is going to be threatening to the intellect, because the intellect wants to control. The intellect wants to constantly be safe. The intellect wants to avoid danger. So anything that seems unstable is uncontrollable, which therefore means is a threat. So that's how the intellect already works. But then we're programmed by society also to believe that emotions are negative or emotions are a sign of weakness. We think that if we have emotions, that means we're out of control. In fact, it's the opposite in my experience. If we suppress our emotions, we are much more out of control, because suppressing the emotions doesn't change the emotions. It just means we're not paying attention to how much they are controlling us. So our emotions are controlling us all the time. Whether we engage in the potential control of them or not, that's our choice. But emotions are going to control so much of our human experience because they're at the core of our human experience. And I want to make a distinction with two words. I just want to offer you my working definition for these, which might be different than the way you understand them or the way you heard somebody else talk about them. But emotions are, I remember them being explained as energy in motion. So if you think about they are energy in motion, then really what emotions are the physical sensations, the energy that we feel in our body, that we sense in our body. Those are emotions. Feelings are how we label those emotions, how we choose to interpret those emotions. And you can make an argument that it's opposite. So don't worry about what is it? Just understand the distinctions, right? The distinctions, the way I want to give them to you here is that the emotions are the energetic sensations and the feelings are how we try to interpret them and language what those sensations are. Because we don't embrace the validity of emotions and we have a negative relationship to the experience, the existence really of emotions in general, we label them in certain ways and we usually try to suppress them. So, and what you'll also hear is when the intellect labels emotions, quite often they're not emotions, but we label them as feelings. So like somebody might say, I feel like nobody loves me. That's not a feeling. And we say this all the time when coaching, because we're like language cops and it gets irritating to some people, but they get the message, right? I would say 80% of the time that somebody says, I feel, they will follow it with something that's not a feeling. It's a judgment. It's an interpretation. So I feel like nobody loves me. That's not a sensation. That's a thought that nobody loves you. And then it's a projection, right? It's a judgment. I feel abandoned. Abandoned is an act. Somebody abandons, they walk away, right? There are feelings associated to that and emotions associated to that. But I feel like I'm not ready. That's not a feeling. I feel scared. Yes, that's a feeling. That's an emotion. Fear. And there's really just a few emotions. The framework that we work with in our neurotransformational coaching is that there are 6 main emotions and we stack them on top of each other. There's anger, fear, pain, regret, desire, and love. And appreciation is thrown in there with love. So those are the main 6 emotions that people experience. And that's the main framework that we use to help people isolate and embrace and then shift whatever needs to be shifted to produce whatever the client wants, or personally whatever we want, right? So in coaching, I think the big mission that we've got to stand for is that embracing emotions is much different and much better than avoiding emotions. Most of us are programmed to avoid emotions. So a lot of the work that we do when we hit something that's really emotional for people is to create space. We always talk about holding space for the emotional experience that this person is having. And my experience in doing that is when we feel our emotions, like really truly just allow the emotion to be the sensory experience that it is, a lot of times there's nothing else to do with it, because there's nothing wrong with emotions. It's a natural human process. It's our understanding or lack of understanding, interpretation, and then the suppressing of them. That's the big issue. This is a gigantic topic. It's something that we're constantly wrestling with clients and with our human experience. But I'm just going to stop there for the purpose of this video. And then the final thing I want to talk about is our decisions. So a decision is just, what do we choose to do? It's the choice of our behavior, right? Our decisions are based upon all the stuff that I've already talked about in this video, all the things that we're going to talk about in the future videos. It's based on everything inside the human. What we choose to do is based on all of the internal stuff. What I want to talk just briefly about in this video, though, is that most of our decisions, I think, especially the big ones, the significant ones in our lives, most of our decisions are an attempt to what we call chase the knot. Not N-O-T, not with a K, but the knot. And what I mean by that is we tend to try to chase the avoidance of the thing that we're afraid of. So we make decisions, again, because we have an intellectual brain. That's a computer, and computers don't have feelings. So computers don't have the emotional sensations. The computers operate on judgments and appearances and perspectives and all that stuff. But the computer of our brain is essentially afraid of danger. So the computer in our brain is trying to keep us alive all the time by avoiding danger. So our intellect is wired and programmed to avoid danger. So what does that mean? The majority of our choices are trying to chase not dangerous. What can I do to not be dangerous or to not be in danger? What can I do to not lose money? What can I do to not be abandoned? What can I do to not fail? What can I do to not be rejected? Let me know if this is landing for you, because when you really dissect the decisions that you're making and you pay attention to the thoughts and the emotions that are attached and all that stuff, you'll realize a lot of our decisions are the avoidance of the negative. The problem with that is we're not actually making decisions into the positive. We're making decisions to avoid the negative. And so we try to not be abandoned. But being not abandoned is not the same as being accepted. If I make a choice in this moment to not be abandoned by you, that doesn't mean I feel accepted by you, which is not going to do anything to the void in me that caused me to want to not be abandoned by you in the first place, which means as soon as I turn this way and I've got another human in front of me, now I need to not be abandoned by them. And I can be not abandoned by 100 people and never feel accepted, because it's not the same thing. It's like in sports, if you choose to play to not lose, that doesn't mean you'll ever win. And not losing is not the same as winning. Not abandonment is not the same as being accepted. Not being hurt is not the same as feeling loved. Not being sad is not the same as feeling happy. So most of us are making decisions by the intellectual choice to avoid a thing that we are afraid of. And in doing that, the best we can get to is neutral. But we can't actually get into the positive emotion that we're wanting. And that's why a lot of people are satisfied but not fulfilled, meaning we can satisfy our intellectual ego and our intellectual desires, but that the intellect being satisfied is not the same as the heart being fulfilled. That's why a lot of people have a lot of money and they're miserable. They have a lot of things. They have the success. They have all the stuff that the intellect says, when I have these things, I should feel something. So then they go out and get those things, but they don't feel anything that they were supposed to feel by getting those things. So the intellect is satisfied, but the heart is not fulfilled. And that's because so many of our decisions are focused on the not. We're entering the void of the not, right? Not sad, not losing, not rejected, not abandoned. When you have this awareness and you start paying attention to your own decisions, I think it could be mind-blowingly life-changing for you.
Hey, if you enjoyed this video, there's really only one thing that makes sense. Watch part 3 right there.
If you are frustrated by results you're not getting, there's a belief that's causing that. And until that belief changes, your results cannot.